Tristan breath caught in his throat as he took in the sight of the once beautiful, sprawling estate. Stained glass windows were shattered. The manicured lawns had begun their slow descent into disrepair. In the wide driveway, the polished marble fountain no longer spat streams of sparkling water. This was not the home he had built out of love and ambition. This was the shell of a life unraveled by secrets, betrayal, and tragedy. He hadn't visited in over a year, not since everything fell apart. It felt like an eternity, each day weighed down by regret. Tristan's mind wandered back to the precise moment everything began to change, the moment he let arrogance, desire, and temptation overshadow the love he had once cherished. As he clenched his fists, he recalled the vow he had whispered on his wedding day. "I'll protect you, Cassandra, forever." Now, that vow lay in ruins. Everything did. All because of a choice, a fleeting connection that sparked a wildfire of lies and heartbreak. He glanced up at the massive wooden doors. It was time to face the devastation, and perhaps in these ashes find the seeds of redemption. Little did Tristan know that redemption would come with its own steep cost. Tristan, 37 at the start of this story, wasn't born into wealth. Raised in a modest neighborhood in the suburbs of Chicago, he had grown up sharing a cramped two-bedroom apartment with his parents and younger sister. From a young age, Tristan's father drilled into him the value of hard work, honesty, and ambition. It was these qualities that eventually propelled Tristan to heights he never imagined. By the time Tristan was in his late 20s, he had launched and sold his first tech startup for an 8-figure sum. He then relocated to New York City, where he established Allaire Innovations, a venture capital firm that specialized in green technology. Friends and contemporaries described him as fiercely intelligent, relentless, and at times ruthless. Rival venture capitalists likened Tristan's boardroom negotiations to a blood sport. He had admirers and detractors in equal measure. During his rise, he brushed shoulders with the famous and powerful. He was invited to speak at events alongside figures like Elon Musk and dined with well-known philanthropists and moguls. That flamboyance was never truly Tristan's style, though, for him, his ambitions were always about something more than money, a desire to prove himself, to right societal wrongs through innovative projects, and perhaps to earn the love and respect his father never managed to fully articulate before he passed away. Tristan's world changed forever the evening he met Cassandra Locklear. She was sitting alone at a high-end charity gala in Manhattan, a bit bored, swirling a glass of champagne, though her lips carried the hint of an enigmatic smile. Cassandra was a magazine editor at a prestigious fashion publication known for her discerning eye and polished style. She had been invited as a guest to write a piece on philanthropy in the tech world. Their conversation began as a polite interview, her questions crisp, her smile luminous. But halfway through, the interview turned into a personal exchange about life and literature. She confided her love for the poetry of Pablo Neruda, while Tristan admitted he had a weakness for classic rock vinyl collections. An hour later, they found themselves dancing to a live jazz band, lost in a moment that drew curious stares from onlookers. Within 3 months, their lives merged. The billionaire bachelor was smitten, and Cassandra, intrigued by this mix of grit and heart, fell deeper in love with each of his private revelations. Less than a year later, they were married in a lush ceremony in the south of France. Only close friends and family gathered at a medieval chateau to witness their vows, sealed under candlelight, with the fragrance of lavender drifting across the evening breeze. Their marriage had seemed ideal, the world at their feet. Cassandra brought grace and warmth to Tristan's sometimes frenzied world of high stakes and cutthroat deals. Tristan, for his part, offered Cassandra the unwavering support and devotion she had never found in her previous relationships. Theirs was a partnership built on trust and mutual admiration. At least, in the beginning, no one, including Tristan or Cassandra, could have foreseen that one day the entire foundation of their marriage and the empire they had built would crack under the weight of a single betrayal. Long before Cassandra Locklear became Cassandra Allaire, she was just Cassie to her best friend, Dahlia St. James. They grew up together in the quiet coastal town of Wilmington, North Carolina. Cassandra's family lived in a slightly more upscale neighborhood, while Dahlia's parents owned an old bookstore that smelled of coffee, aged paper, and vanilla-scented candles. From the age of 5, they were nearly inseparable, cartwheeling on the beach, brainstorming stories under the oak tree behind the St. James bookstore, and passing notes in their shared classes. There was an ease to their friendship, an authenticity that Cassandra rarely found elsewhere. Where Cassandra was more contemplative and artistic, Dahlia was effervescent, adventurous, and occasionally impetuous. They were the perfect complement to each other. But life, as it often does, placed distance between them. After high school, Cassandra attended university in New York to pursue her passion for journalism. Dahlia enrolled in a dance conservatory in California. Their phone calls became sporadic, then nearly non-existent, until a chance reunion a few years later at a mutual friend's wedding. It was a joyful reconnection. Dahlia had pivoted from dance to theatre, and while she had not yet found stardom, she was enjoying small successes off-Broadway. Cassandra had just begun her job at the fashion magazine in Manhattan. They promised each other not to let time slip away again. True to their word, they bonded over weekends. Dahlia sometimes spent the night at Cassandra's studio apartment until a production called her away to a traveling show in Europe. Yet one thing remained constant. Their friendship was always a source of light in Cassandra's life. When Tristan proposed, Dahlia wasn't physically there, but Cassandra spent 2 hours on a late-night call describing every breathless detail, from the champagne under the stars to the ring's subtle elegance. Dahlia's squeals on the other end of the line were exuberant enough to reach the next apartment. Cassandra insisted Dahlia be her maid of honor. She was the only one who could fill that role. Dahlia arrived at the chateau in France just before the ceremony. Tristan and Dahlia met in passing. He found her charming but didn't pay her much heed. His mind was on the impending vows. Dahlia, for her part, was mesmerized by Tristan's success, confidence, and the obvious devotion he held for Cassandra. Later, Cassandra would laugh about Dahlia's starstruck reactions, never imagining how drastically their paths would intersect in the future. 4 years into the marriage, Cassandra's life had changed. She found herself living in a penthouse overlooking Central Park, penning freelance articles rather than working full-time at the magazine. Tristan, on the other hand, was busier than ever, expanding Allaire innovations into new international markets. Their date nights became fewer, phone calls shorter. Yet they still shared an intimacy that felt strong. Cassandra believed that while time and success might cause rifts in other marriages, theirs had a solid core, anchored in mutual love. They had ups and downs, of course. Tristan's father had passed away unexpectedly. The stock market had crashed briefly, forcing Tristan to scramble to shore up his investments. During those times, Cassandra stood by him, offering unwavering support. Indeed, when Tristan looked at her, even in their hectic daily rhythms, he glimpsed the same kind soul he had married. One sunny morning, Cassandra received an unexpected phone call from Dahlia. They had remained close but not as deeply entangled as in their youth. Distance and Dahlia's unpredictable acting schedule often got in the way. Hearing Dahlia's voice now, tinged with excitement, was a surprise. "I'm in New York for a big audition," Dahlia gushed. "Cassandra, I need some moral support. Do you think I could crash at your place for a bit?" "Of course," Cassandra replied without hesitation. "Stay as long as you need." 2 days later, Dahlia arrived at the penthouse with a suitcase and a hopeful heart. She was now in her early 30s, still chasing her dream roles, having landed a few small parts on television and stage productions. There was a new maturity about her, yet she retained that lively sparkle in her eyes. Tristan was polite but distant. He came home late from meetings, offered a brief greeting, and retreated to his home office. On weekends, however, Dahlia's spirited personality began to intrigue him. Cassandra was delighted that the two were getting along. She teased Tristan for always being the stoic one in the room, which Dahlia countered with playful jabs that brought out a rare grin from him. In late August, Dahlia received callbacks for a role in a Broadway production. She floated around the penthouse brimming with optimism. Cassandra and Tristan attended one of her audition run-throughs to show support. Amid the busy bustle of the theatre, Tristan found himself strangely taken by Dahlia's performance. She emanated an electric presence on the stage, a raw vulnerability that tugged at his own hidden emotional corners. That night, he mentioned it offhandedly to Cassandra. "Your friend has a gift. She really draws people in." Cassandra beamed. "I know, she's always had that special spark. If she gets this role, it'll be her big break." Tristan nodded, experiencing a flicker of emotion that felt almost foreign. It wasn't love, certainly not then, but an awareness of Dahlia as a woman, separate from Cassandra, who had her own power and allure. He felt a stab of guilt for noticing this. Dismissing the thought, he left the room, burying himself in business calls and strategic planning for the upcoming quarter. But sometimes, a single spark can set the stage for an inferno. Time seemed to accelerate for the Allaire household. Tristan was consumed with a high-profile acquisition that promised to expand Allaire innovations into Southeast Asia. Cassandra was finalizing an important series of articles about eco-friendly fashion for a renowned lifestyle magazine. And Dahlia's auditions, callbacks, and endless rehearsals consumed her mind entirely. In the midst of this hectic schedule, Dahlia started picking up on little gestures from Tristan, glances that lasted a fraction too long, an extra softness in his voice when they spoke. At first, she chalked it up to her imagination. He was polite to a fault, and she was a guest in his home. Besides, Tristan was known for his unwavering dedication to Cassandra. Everyone in their social circle said so. Nevertheless, coincidences piled up. Once, after Dahlia's late-night rehearsal, she was too exhausted to prepare dinner, so Tristan, returning from a business meeting, offered to cook a light meal in the penthouse's luxurious kitchen. Cassandra was away on an assignment. Over bowls of homemade risotto, they discussed the adrenaline rush that came with performing Tristan in the boardroom, Dahlia on stage. They talked about fear and vulnerability, how success often hinged on not flinching from either. Dahlia felt an odd sense of kinship with Tristan in that moment. She realized they were alike in a surprising way. Both soared on the thrill of risk, pouring their souls into uncertain outcomes. The conversation went on for hours, drifting from business to art to personal insecurities. For Dahlia, it was a rare moment of emotional intimacy with someone she had mostly seen as a powerful, imposing figure. Some nights later, Dahlia returned home again to find Tristan working alone in the living room, sketches of buildings, prototypes, and philanthropic initiatives scattered across the marble table. Over a glass of wine, he confided how he felt weighed down by the public's constant expectations, his philanthropic efforts often overshadowed by critics accusing him of being a green tech monopolist. She admitted she felt overshadowed too, always auditioning among a sea of talented actors, never entirely sure if she was the right fit. They laughed at their shared woes, enjoying each other's company perhaps a bit too much. Their conversation led them to the floor-to-ceiling windows, where they gazed at the vast metropolis below. Lights shimmered from the streets, drawing patterns across their reflections on the glass. A comfortable silence settled between them. When Cassandra returned from her assignment that night, she found them both on the couch, deep in conversation. Dahlia was animated, hands dancing in the air. Tristan, leaning forward, seemed entranced. Cassandra's heart swelled. She took it as a sign that her dear husband and best friend were finally bonding. The notion that something dangerous might lie beneath did not occur to her. Why would it? But temptation can be insidious, creeping into unguarded moments. Both Tristan and Dahlia sensed a spark neither dared name. And sparks can ignite faster than one expects. It happened on a night that felt mundane at the outset. Cassandra had to fly out to Milan to cover a major fashion event. Dahlia's audition schedule was temporarily lightened. She had a break before the final decision on her Broadway role. Tristan had a late-night meeting with international clients via video conference, which ended unexpectedly early. Dahlia was in the kitchen, rummaging through the pantry for a snack, wearing a loose hoodie and yoga pants. Tristan, feeling strangely restless, entered, intending to fetch a bottle of mineral water before heading to bed. A conversation began, a harmless chat about Dahlia's upcoming auditions, but then Dahlia mentioned how uncertain she felt, and Tristan offered a comforting touch on her shoulder, a touch that lingered. Something unspoken, something they had been resisting for weeks, flared to life in that moment. The look they exchanged was loaded with tension, a silent understanding of transgression. And before either could think, they were kissing, a sudden rush of need and confusion pouring out. The reality of what they were doing seemed blurred by a surge of adrenaline, the same rush they both thrived on in their careers. In the dim light of the kitchen, the weight of their betrayal was momentarily overshadowed by a raw, almost desperate desire. When the reality hit them hours later, neither could muster the courage to speak first. Dahlia left the room, eyes brimming with tears, and retreated to the guest bedroom. Tristan stayed behind, numb, staring at the remnants of their impulsive act that had shattered every boundary he believed was sacred. The following morning, an unspoken agreement kept them silent. They communicated only through fleeting glances, shame and confusion etched on their faces. Dahlia avoided Tristan whenever possible, locking herself in her room or leaving the apartment under the guise of errands. Tristan dove headfirst into work, scheduling back-to-back meetings so he wouldn't have to be in the penthouse. Still, the tension simmered. Guilt gnawed at them both. Betraying Cassandra was never part of any plan. Yet an undeniable pull lingered, made worse by the fact that the initial spark had been acted upon. They were bound now by a secret that neither wanted nor knew how to break free from. Cassandra returned from Milan glowing about her successful feature coverage. She brought stories of exotic textures and avant-garde designs, pictures of her interviews with fashion luminaries. She expected to find Tristan equally excited, but he looked exhausted, a ghost of his former self. Dahlia, too, seemed uncharacteristically subdued. At first, Cassandra worried that Dahlia's audition had fallen through, but Dahlia insisted softly that she hadn't yet received word. Tristan excused himself, muttering about a business conference. Concerned, Cassandra gently probed, "Is everything okay at work? You don't look well." He forced a tight smile. "Just pressure. Nothing I can't handle." Behind her encouraging nod, Cassandra felt a flicker of unease. She couldn't place the source. The atmosphere at home felt off. Tension bristled between Tristan and Dahlia, though they made every effort to hide it. If Cassandra noticed them flinch at each other's sudden presence in the hallway or the living room, she attributed it to exhaustion, presuming Dahlia was under stress about her career. One evening, Cassandra inadvertently entered the living room while Tristan and Dahlia were mid-conversation. They froze, too quickly. She couldn't discern what they had been discussing, only that guilt was splashed across their faces like ink. She asked casually, "Is everything okay?" "Just, talking about Dahlia's next audition," Tristan said, ruffling his hair in an uncharacteristic gesture of nervousness. "Right," Dahlia added, her voice cracking. Cassandra's heart pinched. She had never suspected Tristan's fidelity before, but the scene unsettled her. She dismissed the doubt, telling herself that love and trust were the cornerstones of her marriage. Instead, she tried to be supportive, offering Dahlia pep talks and encouraging Tristan to confide in her about business worries. But late at night, staring at the ceiling of their bedroom, Cassandra felt threads of anxiety pull at her. Something unspoken festered in her home. Weeks passed. Dahlia found out she had secured the coveted part in the Broadway production, her first major role. Cassandra and Tristan congratulated her. There were tears, hugs, and even an expensive bottle of champagne. But the celebration was tainted by the undercurrent of guilt that Tristan and Dahlia shared. The bright success Dahlia had yearned for was overshadowed by a secret that she now deeply regretted. Dahlia moved out soon after, in part due to rehearsal schedules, but also because the tension in the penthouse had become unbearable. Cassandra believed her friend's departure was purely professional. Tristan breathed a little easier, grateful for the physical distance, yet the emotional entanglement remained. Their stolen moments and half-uttered admissions lingered like ghosts. With Dahlia gone, Cassandra's suspicions began to crystallize. She noticed how, upon Dahlia's departure, Tristan seemed both relieved and haunted. She caught him staring at pictures of them, all her wedding photos, with Dahlia as maid of honor, his gaze distant. She heard him on hushed phone calls that ended abruptly when she entered a room. One day, while tidying Tristan's study, Cassandra stumbled upon a loose note scribbled words referencing a scheduled meeting that did not align with any official business arrangement. The slip mentioned a hotel bar. Tracing the date, Cassandra realized it overlapped with a period when Tristan had claimed he was at a tech summit in Boston. She decided to confront Tristan directly. Her heart pounded as she laid the note on his desk. "What's this, Tristan?" He hesitated, eyes flicking to the piece of paper. An outdated reminder. "Probably something I forgot to cross off." "Why?" "Because it's at the Bristol Hotel, here in the city, on a date you told me you were in Boston." "Care to explain?" A flicker of panic darted across his face. "It was a last-minute meeting that ended up getting cancelled. I forgot to tell you." She didn't believe him, not entirely. But Tristan, usually articulate and confident, fumbled, and that was enough to set Cassandra's entire being on edge. She wanted to demand more clarity, but some remnant of trust and fear of what she might discover silenced her. She walked away, leaving Tristan alone to grapple with his own lies. Meanwhile, Dahlia tried her best to focus on her rehearsals, but guilt gnawed at her. She was betraying her oldest friend, a woman who had cared for her for decades. She considered telling Cassandra the truth, ripping off the bandage before it festered further. But fear of Cassandra's heartbreak and potential anger paralyzed her. Instead, she poured her conflicts into her performance, channeling raw emotion night after night on stage. For Tristan, it was even worse. A swirl of regret and longing twisted inside him whenever he thought of Dahlia. Cassandra's kind smile and unconditional support magnified the weight of his betrayal. He wished he could rewind time, take back that single impulsive night, but the past had no eraser, and his carefully constructed world was cracking at the seams. It was a cold February afternoon when everything unraveled. Cassandra, restless and haunted by growing suspicions, decided to visit Dahlia unannounced after a matinee performance. She had flowers to congratulate her friend's big break and an unsteady determination to glean anything about the tension swirling around them. Backstage at the theater, Cassandra wove through costume racks, stage lights, and crew members until she found Dahlia's dressing room. She knocked softly. Dahlia opened the door, surprise and then panic flickering across her expression. "Cassandra, what are you doing here?" Dahlia asked, forcing a nervous smile. Cassandra stepped inside. "I came to give you these and to say how proud I am." She extended the bouquet of lilies and roses, Dahlia's favorites. "But I also wanted to talk." Dahlia's face drained of color. "Oh," Cassandra's voice quivered. "Something's off. You and Tristan. I noticed the tension. Please, if there's anything at all, I want to know." The silence that followed stretched, suffocating. Dahlia fiddled with the flowers, avoiding eye contact. And then, in an impulsive flood of guilt, she confessed. She described that night at the penthouse in halting words, apologizing even before she finished her sentence. Cassandra's gasp was sharp, as though air refused to remain in her lungs. Tears welled in her eyes, her body trembling. The flowers slipped from Dahlia's grip, petals scattering across the room. "How could you?" Cassandra whispered, her voice fraught with betrayal, heartbreak and anger all at once. Dahlia reached out, tears streaming down her face. "Cassie, I swear, it only happened once. It was a mistake. I regret it more than anything in my life." Cassandra stumbled back, pressing her hands to her mouth. Her vision blurred, and she felt dizzy, as if the floor beneath her had caved in. The edges of the dressing room seemed to collapse inward. Rage ignited, hot and searing. "You, my best friend, how dare you!" She turned, fleeing the room before Dahlia could even attempt to console her. Outside, the world felt colder. Cassandra felt robbed of breath, her heart screaming in her chest. She dialed Tristan's number with shaking hands, each ring echoing her fury. When Tristan picked up, she spoke only 4 words. "We need to talk." Tristan rushed home, panic ringing in his ears. He found Cassandra standing in the living room, arms folded, tears tracking down her cheeks. She stared at him, the woman he had vowed to protect, now broken by his betrayal. Cassandra's voice trembled. "You slept with Dahlia." He swallowed, his mouth dry. There was no point lying. Cassandra, I'm sorry." She let out a bitter laugh that was half sob. "Is that all you have to say?" Tristan hung his head. It was a mistake, a stupid, unforgivable mistake. It happened once. It meant nothing. "Nothing," she echoed. "My best friend Tristan. You betrayed me with the one person I always trusted." He reached out, but she recoiled as if his touch burned her. "Cass, please. It was a moment of weakness. Don't," she snapped. "Don't try to rationalize this. If it was just sex, if you can reduce it to a weak moment, how do I know this isn't who you really are? A man who sees something tempting and just takes it? That's not fair," Tristan pleaded. "I love you. I never meant to hurt you." But Cassandra's tears were unstoppable. "Don't say you love me now. Love wouldn't do this." Time and space collapsed around them in a maelstrom of accusations, apologies, anger, and heartbreak. Cassandra cried until her eyes were swollen. Tristan attempted to explain, to atone, but his words fell flat. The confrontation reached a crescendo when Cassandra hurled her wedding ring across the room. It hit the glass coffee table, bouncing onto the carpet. The metallic chime reverberated with finality. She ran out, leaving Tristan alone with the echoes of everything he had destroyed. Cassandra found herself outside, wearing only a thin sweater against the biting wind. She wandered aimlessly through city streets, tears numbing her more than the cold ever could. The humiliation, the pain, it felt like an assault on her entire being. Her phone buzzed incessantly. Tristan, Dahlia, well-meaning friends. She silenced it all. Lost in her anguish, Cassandra stepped off a curb, not noticing the oncoming taxi until it screeched, narrowly avoiding her by mere inches. A bystander pulled her back, swearing in alarm. Shaken, Cassandra realized how close she had come to real harm. She retreated to a nearby bench and sat in silence, letting the winter winds sting her face, matching the hollowness inside. That night, she checked into a hotel under her maiden name, Locklear, and turned her phone off. She needed to be invisible, at least for one night. News traveled fast through social circles. Dahlia missed 2 performances, consumed by her guilt and fear. The stage director threatened to replace her if she didn't show up the following day. Tristan's performance at Allaire Innovations faltered. He cancelled meetings, leaving executives baffled. His once impenetrable composure cracked in front of them. He told them he had a personal emergency and needed time. He hid in his private office, staring at Cassandra's photograph on his desk. Days rolled into weeks. Cassandra refused to speak to Tristan, ignoring his calls and messages. She told Dahlia never to contact her again. She felt betrayed by her husband, deceived by her best friend, and uncertain if she could trust her own judgments about life and love. Still, the world pressed forward. Cassandra considered divorcing Tristan, but the thought of a tabloid circus, the heartbreak of dividing everything they had built, made her hesitate. She had always seen Tristan as her partner in building a meaningful future. Now, she didn't know who he was. But she also recognized the monumental difficulty of untangling her life from his, both emotionally and practically. Meanwhile, Tristan clung to the hope that their love could still survive. He wrote Cassandra letter after letter, which he had delivered to the hotel where she was staying. Sometimes she opened them, reading lines dripping with remorse, recounting memories of their early days. Other times she tore them up unopened, unsure if she could bear more pain. Dahlia sank into self-loathing, her dream role turning into a living nightmare. Each night on stage, she wrestled with guilt. Off-stage, she was haunted by Cassandra's tear-streaked face. The prospect of success felt tainted, as if she could never fully claim the happiness she'd yearned for, now that she had broken the trust of the one person who had always believed in her. About 2 months after the revelation, Cassandra surprised Tristan by appearing at Allaire Innovations. She had spent the time reflecting, wading through tears, therapy sessions, and conversations with legal advisors. Now she stood in his office, tall and resolute, determined to gain clarity on whether to rebuild or tear everything down. Tristan dismissed his staff. They were alone, the silence heavy. Cassandra sat across from him, arms crossed. "You said you love me," she began, her tone measured. "Prove it. Tell me every reason you did this. Tell me why it should matter to me to keep fighting for a marriage you put in jeopardy." Tristan leaned forward, raw desperation in his eyes. "I was lonely, Cass. I've been under tremendous pressure. I felt disconnected from you. It doesn't excuse anything, but that's how I justified it to myself. It was wrong, horribly wrong." She studied him. "So I'm partially to blame, is that it?" He shook his head violently. No, it's all on me. I just need you to see that it wasn't about Dahlia. It was a stupid, fleeting moment of intimacy when I was lost. If I could rip it out of time, I would." "Words," Cassandra retorted. "Your promises ring hollow now." Silence settled again. Tristan pressed his palms together as though in prayer. "I want to go to counseling. I want to do whatever it takes. Please, I love you." Cassandra swallowed, tears threatening to break through. "I'm not saying yes, but I'm not ready to walk away yet. A part of me, maybe foolishly, wants to see if we can salvage what we had." A glimmer of hope lit Tristan's eyes. "I'll do anything," he whispered. She stood, nodding stiffly. "We'll start therapy, but I can't promise forgiveness. Not yet." With that, she left, leaving Tristan to cradle the fragile hope she had just granted him. Dahlia's show went on. She danced and sang under the spotlight, garnering praise and applause. Critics complimented her emotional depth. They had no idea it stemmed from real-life turmoil. After each performance, Dahlia returned to her apartment, her success feeling hollow. One night, after a particularly tumultuous performance, Dahlia found Tristan waiting at the stage door. She froze, uncertain whether to flee or confront him. He approached hesitantly. "Can we talk?" She glanced around. The crew was already whispering. They stepped aside to a secluded alleyway, the distant hum of traffic filling the silence. Dahlia spoke first, voice trembling. "I told Cassandra the truth. She hates me, and honestly I don't blame her." Tristan sighed. "She's agreed to counseling with me. I'm going to try to fix this. I'm sorry, Dahlia, but we can't be in contact like this. Not anymore." Tears gathered in Dahlia's eyes. "I never wanted to tear you apart. Cassandra is my best friend. God, Tristan, why did we do this?" He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, then withdrew, remembering the boundary they had crossed. "We both messed up. I'm going to try to make things right, if possible. You should too. Maybe one day she'll forgive you." She shook her head. "I don't know if she ever will." Tristan left her there, the heartbreak in her eyes mirroring his own. They parted like two strangers who had stumbled down a forbidden path, now desperate to return to the main road. Couples therapy proved more grueling than either Cassandra or Tristan expected. The counselor, Dr. Joel Patterson, pushed them to explore not only Tristan's betrayal, but also the cracks that formed in their marriage over time. Cassandra discovered aspects of her own behavior, her focus on work, her emotional distance during certain stressful periods that might have inadvertently contributed to Tristan's sense of isolation. Still, there was no excuse for infidelity. Tristan admitted as much. The sessions brought out painful confessions, repressed resentments, and raw vulnerability. Sometimes, Cassandra left the office in tears, only to have Tristan follow her, uncertain if he should comfort her or give her space. Days turned into weeks, and gradually the sessions yielded tiny buds of progress. Cassandra was still hurt, but she began to see glimpses of the Tristan she first fell in love with, the man who cherished her above all else. Tristan, for his part, committed himself to rebuilding trust, giving Cassandra access to his schedule, his phone, anything she asked. Yet he understood that trust, once broken, was not easily restored. They started spending more time together outside the sessions, going for walks in Central Park, cooking dinner side by side, attempting to rekindle the bond that once felt effortless. It was fragile, like a flower sprouting through the cracks of a frozen landscape, but it was there. However, the hardest part for Cassandra was the haunting image of Dahlia, a friend who had become a symbol of betrayal. In therapy, Cassandra expressed her deep confusion. She missed her best friend, yet despised her for what she had done. Dr. Patterson encouraged Cassandra to consider closure with Dahlia one day, but for now the wounds were too fresh. Almost a year passed since Cassandra first discovered Tristan's infidelity. Their therapy continued, and surprisingly, their relationship stabilized to a functional, even caring rhythm. There were nights of laughter again, fleeting but real. Tristan poured himself into philanthropic endeavors, launching a scholarship fund for underprivileged students in Chicago in his father's name. Cassandra returned to writing more passionately, penning articles that showcased raw honesty about resilience and forgiveness. Yet, the shadow of Dahlia lingered. Cassandra avoided everything related to her former best friend. Even though Dahlia's Broadway success had grown her name floated in interviews, her face appeared on playbills across the city. The production was rumored to be heading to London. Dahlia might soon travel abroad for another triumph, but she would leave behind heartbreak and shattered trust. Then, one crisp autumn evening, Cassandra attended a charity benefit for underfunded arts programs in public schools, supporting Tristan's philanthropic efforts. She mingled politely, sipping a glass of champagne. Near the silent auction table, she froze. Dahlia stood across the room, chatting with a director. Their eyes met. Time stopped. Cassandra wanted to bolt, but something anchored her in place. Dahlia excused herself and walked over, head bowed, tears threatening to spill. "Cassandra," Dahlia whispered, I'm sorry to approach you like this. I had no idea you'd be here. I wanted to say how truly sorry I am. I know I have no right to—" Cassandra held up a trembling hand. "Stop. I can't do this here." Dahlia swallowed hard, nodding. "I understand. If you ever want to talk, you know where to find me." Cassandra turned away, her heart pounding. She felt Tristan's presence at her side, his hand hovering near her arm, as though scared she'd recoil. She steadied herself, exhaling a shaky breath. "Let's go," she whispered. He ushered her outside, the night air biting at her cheeks. 2 months later, Dahlia sent a letter to Cassandra, delivered to the penthouse. In it, Dahlia poured out her sorrow, her wishes for Cassandra's happiness, and an acknowledgement that forgiveness might never come, but Dahlia wanted Cassandra to know she held profound remorse. She mentioned she would be heading to London soon for the international run of her Broadway show. It was a goodbye letter of sorts. Cassandra read it over and over, tears staining the parchment. A swirl of emotions roiled within her: anger, sadness, longing for the friendship she had lost, and a grudging respect for Dahlia's attempts at atonement. That night, Cassandra found herself writing a reply, pages of pent-up anguish, memories of their childhood spent on North Carolina's beaches, apologies for her own silence, and an uncertain hope that maybe one day they could meet on new ground. She never sent it. Instead, she tucked it into a drawer, along with all the other painful reminders of betrayal. Life has a way of offering small moments of reprieve before chaos strikes again. On a chilly February morning, precisely a year and a half since Cassandra discovered Tristan's affair, the couple embarked on a weekend retreat upstate, hoping to reconnect amid quiet forests and peaceful lakes. The getaway felt almost magical. They laughed over coffee and croissants, hiked through leafless but enchanting trails, and found a measure of calm in each other's presence. On the second night, after a cozy dinner, Tristan proposed a toast in their private cabin. "To healing," he said, voice trembling, "and to rediscovering what we lost." Cassandra's eyes glistened with cautious optimism. Their glasses clinked, the fireplace crackling softly behind them. She leaned against him, letting warmth and hope fill her heart for the first time in ages. The next morning, they received a phone call that changed everything. Tristan's top-level executive, Jordan Klein, reached them with panic in his voice. A devastating industrial accident had occurred at one of the foreign factories associated with Alaire Innovations' production line, an affiliate company that Tristan had only recently invested in. Reports indicated multiple workers were injured. There were accusations of neglected safety protocols. Tristan's face paled as he listened, each word hammering away at the fragile sense of peace he and Cassandra had begun to nurture. The cost of the potential lawsuit, the moral responsibility, and the negative press threatened to crush him. The timing could not have been worse. Tristan insisted they return to the city immediately. Once more, the storms of crisis overshadowed their personal healing. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of damage control. Tristan flew to the accident site with a team of legal and PR experts, trying to rectify the situation and assist those injured. The media latched onto the story, painting him as either a negligent billionaire or a well-meaning magnate, depending on the outlet's angle. Stress mounted beyond anything he had ever experienced. Cassandra tried to be supportive, but her own emotional reserves were depleted. Their fragile reconciliation felt threatened by the avalanche of public scrutiny. Protests erupted outside Alaire Innovations' headquarters. Share prices plummeted. Board members whispered about removing Tristan as CEO if he couldn't stabilize the chaos. In the midst of this turmoil, Cassandra felt an eerie distance between them, like a repeat of the circumstances that had led to his affair. Only this time, Tristan wasn't just distant, he was nearly unreachable. His calls were curt, messages vague, as he scrambled to salvage the company he had built. Cassandra couldn't help but worry he might seek solace elsewhere again. That lingering doubt gnawed at her, opening a wound she thought was scabbing over. While Tristan was abroad, rumors circulated. Some tabloids alleged he was seen in the company of unknown women, or that he was engaged in shady business deals. Cassandra tried to ignore them, but her trust was fragile. Late at night, alone in the penthouse, she fell into anxiety attacks, haunted by possibilities of repeated betrayal. When Tristan finally returned, the man who walked through the door was barely recognizable, exhausted, haunted, and carrying a sense of defeat. Cassandra hurried to him, scanning his face for answers, but he sidestepped her embrace. He mumbled something about needing sleep and locked himself in the guest bedroom. That was the beginning of the final unraveling. The pain in his voice, the despair in his eyes, Cassandra could sense that he was carrying a burden he believed she couldn't shoulder. And perhaps he was right, because even though she tried to stand by him, an undercurrent of suspicion still tainted her every offer of support. Weeks later, Tristan's company was mired in lawsuits, and the stress on him was unrelenting. Cassandra watched helplessly as Tristan pulled away from her day by day, hour by hour. She suggested therapy sessions again, but he refused, saying he was too busy dealing with real problems. The tension escalated, culminating in explosive arguments that left both of them in tears. One stormy night, they argued about the direction of the company, finances, and their marriage all at once. Cassandra lashed out, accusing him of shutting her out, ignoring the foundation they had tried to rebuild. Tristan, driven to the edge, accused her of never truly forgiving him. Their shouts echoed through the penthouse. In a moment of fury, Tristan grabbed his car keys and stormed out, ignoring Cassandra's pleas for him to stay. Rain pummeled the streets. Tristan sped through Manhattan's slick roads, anger and despair clouding his judgment. Witnesses later said the car careened through an intersection on a red light, colliding with a delivery truck. By the time emergency services arrived, Tristan Allaire was barely clinging to life. Cassandra rushed to the hospital, soaked in the torrential downpour. In the sterile fluorescent corridor, a doctor solemnly informed her that Tristan had sustained severe head trauma and internal injuries. The chances of survival were slim. She sank into a chair, numb, tears merging with the rainwater dripping from her hair. She wanted to scream, to plead with any higher power to save him. Suddenly, Dahlia was there too, summoned by some friend who felt she should know. Dahlia kept her distance, hugging the wall, tears streaming down her face, as Cassandra buried her face in her hands, haunted by the possibility that Tristan's life was slipping away. Tristan remained in a coma for a week, the machines in the ICU beeping a steady rhythm that felt like an artificial heartbeat for Cassandra's entire world. She never left his side, sleeping fitfully in a hospital chair, pressing his hand to her cheek, whispering pleas and apologies. She recounted memories of their first dance in France, of the nights they spent dreaming of a future filled with children and philanthropic projects that would make the world a better place. Dahlia snuck in once, quietly, when Cassandra was too exhausted to notice. She stood at the foot of Tristan's bed, tears in her eyes, and mumbled regrets that no one but the unconscious Tristan and the hum of machines heard. On the 8th day, Tristan's vitals plummeted unexpectedly. Doctors and nurses rushed in, and Cassandra was ushered out, her cries echoing down the hallway. It felt like an eternity before the doctor emerged, a solemn expression giving the answer before words were uttered. Tristan Allaire was gone. Cassandra crumpled to the ground, a raw, guttural sob ripping from her chest. She was vaguely aware of Dahlia rushing forward to help, but she pushed her away, body shaking with grief. The doctor gave space, a quiet acknowledgement of tragedy's finality. In the end, the man who had built an empire, the man who had soared on ambition and fallen to betrayal, died with Cassandra's name on his lips at least, that was what the nurse said, to offer solace. Cassandra clung to that small mercy, even as a wave of despair threatened to drown her. Loss has a way of clarifying priorities. Tristan's funeral was attended by everyone from business magnates in custom suits to the factory workers he had once championed to help. In death, he was praised for his philanthropic heart, his visionary strides in green technology, and even his unwavering love for Cassandra, though, ironically, the heartbreak he inflicted was invisible to the eulogies. Cassandra stood at the graveside in a black coat, the cold wind whipping her hair. She placed a single white rose on the coffin. She felt Dahlia's presence behind her, but didn't turn around. Let Dahlia mourn in her own space. Today was about final goodbyes. When the ceremony ended and mourners drifted away, Cassandra lingered. She whispered, "I forgive you for what you did to me, Tristan. And I'm sorry for the words left unsaid, for not standing by you more when you needed me most." In her chest, grief coiled like a serpent, but somehow the forgiveness she offered both to Tristan and herself felt like a small first step toward releasing the heavy burden of the past. Dahlia wrote to Cassandra once more after the funeral, a short message. "I'm so sorry. I know I have no right to ask anything from you, but I'd like to see you, even if only to say goodbye properly." Cassandra sat with the note for days, uncertain of what to do. Anger, sorrow, regret, and an old buried love for her childhood friend tussled in her heart. In the end, she decided to meet Dahlia at a small cafe on the Upper West Side, away from the hustle of Midtown. When Dahlia entered, she looked haggard, eyes rimmed with red. Cassandra's own eyes were shadowed by grief. They sat across from each other, two friends turned strangers by betrayal. Dahlia's voice trembled. "I don't even know how to begin. I wanted you to know that I'm leaving for London soon, as the show is transferring there. I won't come back, not if you don't want me to. I just—" Her tears welled up. "I needed to say I'm sorry, again, for everything." Cassandra exhaled, her own tears burning. "You broke my heart, Dahlia. You were my best friend. And Tristan, he's gone now. I lost the chance to fully heal with him. You got to say goodbye, but I—" Dahlia tried to speak, but the words caught in her throat. "I'd do anything to change what happened, Cassie. I know that's impossible." Silence stretched. The background din of clinking cups and muted chatter filled the space. Finally, Cassandra nodded, tears trickling down her cheeks. "I don't know if I can ever truly forgive you for that betrayal," she whispered, "but I also can't deny the decades of friendship we had. Maybe one day we can find a way to remember that." Dahlia broke down, quietly sobbing. Cassandra let her cry, a strange cocktail of empathy and sorrow surging within her own chest. This was the closest thing to closure they might ever find. In the months that followed Tristan's death, Cassandra faced one challenge after another. Allaire Innovations went through a significant restructuring. As Tristan's widow and partial owner, she had a role in deciding the company's future. Though she lacked Tristan's business acumen, she was driven by the same philanthropic passion. She collaborated with the board to ensure fair compensation for the injured workers in the factory accident, investing resources in upgrading safety measures. She sold the penthouse, unable to bear the ghosts in every room. She kept a few mementos, photos from their wedding in France, Tristan's watch, the vinyl collection he loved so much. Everything else she donated or put into storage, determined to free herself from constant reminders of heartbreak. On a personal level, Cassandra sought therapy to cope with her grief, betrayal, and guilt. She wrote extensively, journaling each stage of her emotional journey. This eventually birthed an idea for a book, a memoir exploring love, loss, and resilience. Dahlia left for London as planned. Occasionally, a mutual acquaintance or a social media snippet informed Cassandra that Dahlia was performing brilliantly, garnering standing ovations and awards. Cassandra no longer felt the stabbing pain at the mention of Dahlia's name. Instead, it was a quiet ache, tinged with acceptance. As for Cassandra, she found herself standing on new ground alone, but not without purpose. She continued some philanthropic endeavors in Tristan's memory, established a foundation to help aspiring journalists, and threw herself into her writing. It was both a therapy and a way to process her experiences. The sorrow still visited her, particularly on rainy nights, reminiscent of the one that took Tristan's life. But she carried on. Epilogue. Seeds of Hope. Spring arrived with a gentle promise. The city's trees blossomed and the air carried a hint of renewal. Cassandra was no longer the naive young woman who believed a perfect marriage made her invincible, nor was she consumed by the betrayal that once shattered her. She had endured a storm of love, jealousy, heartbreak, death, and guilt, and though the scars remained, she stood taller, more certain of herself. In early May, she finished the final draft of her book, tentatively titled Broken Vows, Unbroken Spirit. It wasn't just a recounting of a tragic affair or a cautionary tale about trusting too easily. It was an exploration of how love can heal and hurt, sometimes simultaneously, and how the human spirit can find new ways to rebuild even after catastrophic loss. The publishers, upon reading a snippet, felt her raw honesty would resonate with countless readers. They offered her a deal. With trembling hands, Cassandra signed the contract, tears of both joy and sadness threatening to mar the ink. On the anniversary of Tristan's death, Cassandra visited his grave. She stood there in the hush of dawn, a bouquet of lavender in hand, a nod to the lavender fields in France where they wed. A gentle breeze moved through the cemetery. She spoke quietly, her voice carrying a sense of calm acceptance. "I don't know if you can hear me, Tristan," she said, "but I'm okay, and I hope you've found peace, wherever you are." I loved you deeply. A part of me always will." She placed the bouquet down, letting the wind scatter her words. Then she turned and walked away, not with bitterness or regret, but with a promise to live fully, authentically, and with open eyes to the lessons she had learned. In the end, life had tested Cassandra to her core through betrayal, heartbreak, and devastating loss. Yet she emerged stronger, guided by a resilient spirit, a renewed sense of purpose, and a compassionate heart that, despite everything, still dared to hope. Reflecting on resilience, connection, and authenticity, the saga of Tristan, Cassandra, and Dahlia serves as a complex examination of human frailty and the power of forgiveness, both of oneself and others. Tristan's betrayal set off a series of painful events that tested the bounds of love, trust, and loyalty. Dahlia's ambition and insecurities, combined with an unexpected surge of temptation, led her to make a terrible choice that cost her a lifelong friend. Cassandra was left to navigate a maze of betrayal and grief, ultimately finding a path to healing, self-discovery, and new beginnings. Their story underscores the delicate balance between ambition and moral grounding, showcasing how even the most seemingly stable relationships can unravel under the pressure of unacknowledged desires and unchecked fears. And yet, amid the tragedy, Tristan's death, a friendship in ruins, a marriage undone, there was growth. Cassandra learned the depth of her own strength. Dahlia found a renewed sense of accountability, and Tristan, in his final days, showed remorse and love, reminding us that while we are all flawed, we have the capacity for good. In a world where betrayal and tragedy can strike unexpectedly, the tale leaves us with a powerful reminder. Resilience is born from confronting our deepest wounds, connection is nurtured by sincerity and empathy, and authenticity emerges when we acknowledge the full tapestry of our experiences, the joys, the mistakes, and the grief. Only by embracing the truth of who we are can we find genuine paths to redemption and hope.